Colleagues, Bob Chapek.
Good morning. President Whitten, distinguished members of the faculty, graduates, and members of our Indiana family. Thank you for calling me home and for this extraordinary honor. While I've traveled more than, believe it or not, 3 million miles over the course of my career, maybe the most important trip of my lifetime were the 200 miles my family drove from my hometown of Hammond to get here. Because after that trip, I found everything. I gained a world-class education, I learned to think analytically, and on day 2 of my freshman year outside Forest Hall, I met the love of my life. And so when I thought about what I wanted to say today, I thought of 2 things. First, I wanted to share a little wisdom from a guy who's seen quite a bit, and then give you a mission, something I believe you and your generation can contribute to the world. And of course, at Disney, we're storytellers. So to get us started, I want to bring us back to Hammond, Indiana in 1970s. So from anyone outside the state, Hammond is a part of a string of hardworking, industrialized cities below Chicago called the region. And like our more cosmopolitan neighbor, Hammond has a very striking skyline, but it's smokestacks, not office buildings. And beneath that skyline, our neighborhood was modest but very proud. The Chapek household was certainly a loving home, but like most in the area, our living arrangements were quite humble, and there weren't always enough bedrooms, so for a period of time, I actually slept in the breakfast nook. My parents both had jobs, which was really unusual back in those days, and I was a latchkey kid before that term was even popular. And when it came to school, George Rogers Clark High School wasn't exactly what you'd call college prep at the time. In fact, when I told my high school counselor I planned to go to college, she just stared at me dumbfounded and said, "Why would you go and do that?" So needless to say, not everybody had my ambition for a life outside the region, but in fact, most of my extended family have happily lived there entire lives, and I go back whenever I can, because it's home and I feel a connection. But I personally knew that I wanted something different. And I knew, because there was one thing we did as a family every year that I knew something had to happen. And that thing was our annual visit to Walt Disney World. Driving through the gates of the happiest place on earth was like nothing I've ever done before. There was no greater contrast to the region. It was sunny, warm, and impossibly green. The buildings were bright, the air smelled like popcorn, and watching over the entire thing was an immaculate castle, not a towering factory. And the people, the happy people in really cool outfits, said I was their guest. And it was certainly a long way from Hammond and everything I knew about the world. The Disney magic that I found in Orlando ignited my mind and ignited my spirit. Now, I did not set out to lead the company or even work for it. I just knew that there was a whole nother world out there, and I wanted to leave my mark on it. So when my dad pointed the hood of our old Chevy down I-65 to drop me off in Bloomington, my mind was made up. IU is my ticket to a new life. But I was in for a rude awakening, that's for sure, because suddenly my academic preparedness, or lack thereof, was front and center. It seemed everybody I knew had taken something called an AP class, and I hadn't even heard of them. Organic chemistry? Forget it. So I fought 2 battles at once. grinding away to pass my classes while also scrambling to backfill my gaps. And by the way, majoring in microbiology made it even worse. So despite graduating near the top of my high school class, I was still amongst the least prepared for the adventure that lies ahead. So I was kind of desperate. Desperate to demonstrate my worthiness and desperate not to waste a dime of my parents' money on a school that was frankly testing my limits at the time. But that desperation turned to determination, and my dream of defying expectations and the odds took over. And just like Iron Man draws his energy from that arc reactor, I get a thump from my drive to prove myself every single day. It's a lifetime power supply that pushes me through doubts, difficulties, and around those who keep underestimating kids from the region. Which brings me to the wisdom part. How did a proud region rat ever get to lead the most magical company on earth? Well, I've certainly been what many people would call lucky. But I don't believe in luck, and I've never waited for it. Instead, I believe in willpower, optimism, and preparation. Fortunately, when it comes to preparation, your IU degrees validate that this institution has fully prepared you. You're as ready for the next chapter as any graduates in America. But now to stand up and excel, it's really up to you. You need to make sure you're prepared for each and every opportunity that comes your way. And to this day, I still heavily prepare for everything I do. And I make sure I've got answers, not just to the questions at hand, but to any questions that could come up about the answers to my original question. And that means I'm armed with an immense depth of insight whenever I walk into a meeting or any kind of negotiation. And developing that level of insight will set you apart in almost any setting. But frankly, preparation alone is not enough. And I know it's cliche, and maybe I've been pixie dusted many times, but I absolutely believe that willpower can help you overcome incredible odds and achieve just about anything. I've certainly seen it in my life, the life of my family, and the lives of so many people that I've met around the world. You simply got to keep going and pushing. Don't get discouraged, cultivate patience, and no matter what the odds, be optimistic. And as I look towards your futures, I hope you too are optimistic. And I know that can be hard, especially given the state of our world and national discourse. Division is now the defining feature in our imperfect but extraordinary country. Social media gives everybody an outlet for expression, but somehow adding voices hasn't expanded understanding. Rather, the national conversation has been twisted to further divide people, to send them to their separate corners, and to prevent us from finding common ground. Cynicism is driving disengagement and, most tragically, suppressing the most critical of human traits, empathy. Around the world, the situation is no more encouraging. But my ask of you is to look beyond the despair and apathy to be the generation that turns the tide. You can spark the regeneration of our civic culture. And if you think it's impossible, I promise you it can be done. In fact, the current state of our country feels an awful lot like the climate of my time here at IU. The Vietnam War and the culture wars of the 70s left deep divisions in American society and across our culture. But on March 30th, 1981, events shook us out of it. First, President Reagan was shot and gravely wounded. But then, on that same night, IU won our 4th national championship by, of course, knocking off North Carolina. And somehow, between our awakened patriotism and the pride that we have as being Hoosiers, a great wave of positivity surged through our campus. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. It swept away the residue of old arguments, and for a time, we became a much more unified student body. But we can't wait for some catalyst to shake us out of our national malaise. And after all, if a global pandemic didn't do it, I'm not sure what else will. Instead, you must will us out of it by finding common ground with each other, your neighbors, coworkers, and peers on social media and in the real world. Treat them with respect. And if they don't reciprocate, smother them with kindness and empathy. And if you don't think taking the high road means letting go of your beliefs or principles, don't think that, because you haven't let them go. You've just chosen to seek common ground above the fray. Maybe they'll understand you, maybe you'll understand them, maybe nobody's mind ever changes, but you'll come together in some way. You'll be forging new connections that can be built upon and built on and built on until finally, once again, we are a whole society. Now, for many people, Disney represents some of that common ground that brings us all together, and it's one of the reasons I'm so proud to lead this fine company. We believe in acceptance, and we believe in a welcoming spirit. And when guests walk through our gates, the points of division just seem to evaporate away. In fact, the biggest disagreements our guests generally have is arguing whether Splash, Thunder, or Space is the best mountain. People feel the way they do about Disney because of the stories that we tell, stories that connect on a deep emotional level. And the fact that we can tell stories that resonate across political, geographic, economic, and seemingly every other division out there gives me hope about our dilemma. There's still more that unites us than divides us. So go out and find those connection points and bring this world together. You know, there's an IU connection that runs through all of you. So go take this IU bond with you to your next chapter. Grab hold of that connective thread and start pulling this country back to a healthy civic climate. We need a brighter, more optimistic, more inclusive national story. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. It'll take determination, perseverance, willpower, and maybe a little magic. Class of 2022, I've been transcending low expectations for 40-odd years, but there's no doubt in my mind about the inherent potential in each one of you. After all, you're IU grads. Go surprise the world. Thank you.